No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 57. And to support this brand new independent news venture, please hit subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. Today, does James O'Brien want Nigel Farage dead? Is his rhetoric now directly putting the safety of the Reform UK leader under threat? And should Lbc'S sack him as a result? That is the bombshell claim made by Nigel while speaking to his employers at GB News during the party's weekend in Birmingham.
I think he's someone that incites violence.
Do you?
I do. I don't think he should be broadcasting.
He would deny that.
He has caused so much hatred towards me. It's just not true. And you know,
in my digest next, I argue that O'Brien is using proven lies to add to the hatred against Farage, just like the Democrats have done in the US with Donald Trump. Then my superstar panel, Henry Bolton and Dodds weigh in. Also coming up today. Keir, Scrounger and Victoria Sponger show they are just the start of Labour's disgusting sleaze hypocrisy. Yet that champagne socialist Gary Neville has gone to the party conference to defend the indefensible.
Absolutely incredible that this level of attention is now being paid to a Labour Prime Minister. When I look at the absolute cronyism that we watched for years under that, it was just let go. I'm sorry for the rant, but absolutely ridiculous, absolutely incredible that this level of.
And women's rights campaigner Kellie Jay Keen attacked again by the woke mob, yet there is zero outrage in the MSF.
How are you not shaking? I'm shaking my face. Jesus Christ.
Then, in the uncancelled after-show royal YouTube sensation, according to Taz, on why scandal played Meghan Markle, called in sick to a Kevin Costner event with Prince Harry, who has now arrived solo in New York, is all what it seems. You can register to watch on our own website right now at www.outspoken.live. Most importantly, it is a safe space, free of censorship, and your support at just £5 a month not only gives you 30 minutes of extra content every single weekday, it also allows us to continue making this independent daily news show. But now, let's go. If James O'Brien was not protected by virtue of the fact he sits squarely as the defender of the indefensible on the establishment left, he probably would have been cancelled, silenced, and arrested long ago. Because this toxic, highly unpleasant red-cheeked sociopath spreads more hate based on provable mistruths than anyone operating in the public square today. His hate campaign against Nigel Farage is not only deranged, it's becoming dangerous. O'Brien is trying to turn Farage into a target like Donald Trump in the US, and disturbingly, it's working. Nigel is not one to moan about criticism. He knows what's expected as part of the job. So the fact he said this about O'Brien on GB News is highly significant.
I thought that sentence there was interesting. For me, you're reaching out into your critics. I mean, how would you convince your old LBC chum James O'Brien? I mean, he says you stoke division. You know all this.
I think he's someone that incites violence.
Do you?
I do. I don't think he should be broadcasting.
He would deny that.
He has caused so much hatred towards me. It's just not true. And you know, I might have been criticised in the past, you know, for attacking people in the European Parliament. All I ever did was tease them. And, you know, some of these people, some of what's being said in media and being repeated out there in the streets, particularly since the riots, is really unpleasant.
Well, O'Brien might deny that, but Nigel is correct. In a very honest interview with Nick Ferrari last week on LBC, as James O'Brien lay in wait to whip up more hate, Nigel spoke in more detail than ever before about why he cannot even hold in-person surgeries in Clacton.
You won't be doing physical surgeries in Clacton?
Not yet.
Do you envisage that you will eventually?
When Parliament allows me.
Why is Parliament blocking you?
Have a guess.
Have you been advised for your own security not to hold surgeries
I would have thought that would make sense, wouldn't you?
Who was that advice come from?
Well, the Speaker's office.
Lindsay Hoyle's office.
And beneath the Speaker's office, there is a security team who give advice and say you should do some things and not do others. So we're not in a fit state to do the old-style surgeries. But you know what, David? If you've got something to say to me as a Clacton resident, actually Zoom is not the end of the world.
You won't be doing physical.
He made clear there is one person to blame in the MSM for that perilous situation.
Well, do you want to apologise for anything you said now?
No, I wish I'd...
the Farage riots by some people.
No, that was that moron.
They are called by some
that was that moron, O'Brien, that comes on this channel after you, and no wonder my security detail's as big as it is. It's because of people like him.
I have to ask you to expand on that.
Well, when you spread hatred and you spread lies, you anger a lot of people, and then their feelings against you become potentially violent.
How big is your security detail?
It's big, and it's changed a lot since quotes like that.
Well,
now that was a moment for O'Brien to reflect and make peace with Nigel. They were in the same studio, remember? Imagine if he had said, I disagree with every single one of your policy positions, but you are a former colleague, and I stress now on the record that I am not calling for any violence against you. We live in a democracy, and you should feel safe to campaign within the bounds of safety and the law. That would have been a unifying moment, showing that politics are one thing, but personal security comes above everything else in a civil society. Instead, O'Brien showed his true soul and doubled down.
Much.
Nigel Farage, thank you for appearing here on LBC and taking calls. I am done for another day. James O'Brien's the other side of the news on LBC. I'm with you tomorrow morning from 7. Meantime, stay safe.
Thank you, Nick. The time is approaching 10 o'clock and, well, there's a lot to get through today. For example, have you ever had violent race riots named after you, or indeed been accused by the head of the Met of emboldening the racist thugs responsible? Has your vile and ignorant rhetoric ever helped instigate attempts to burn people alive in their beds? Have you ever cited a self-described misogynist facing rape and people trafficking charges in Romania as a trustworthy news source for events in the UK? Or described yourself as part of a similar phenomenon to him? Have you ever helped a convicted woman beater get elected to the UK Parliament? And have any newly elected MPs spent more time in America getting binned off by Donald Trump than they have in their own constituency? And what would you call someone who answers yes to all those questions?
On your radio.
Disgusting. O'Brien appears to believe that Farage deserves to be attacked. No wonder Nigel feels he is inciting violence against him. Now, I know exactly what it's like when O'Brien unleashes his leftist mob of hate merchants based on complete mistruths. And so too do the victims of Carl Beach, the paedophile fantasist who O'Brien spent years publicly supporting in a bid to bring down his political enemies. And the Farage derangement syndrome, started by O'Brien on LBC, is fast spreading through the rest of the MSM, with Channel 4 at the Reform UK conference picking up the line that Nigel had something to do with causing these so-called riots in the wake of the Southport massacre.
Do you regret listening to Andrew Tate?
Millions of young men did, I didn't.
Well, you told LBC you did, that was where
No, I didn't.
Your tweet had come from.
I don't know what's wrong with you people. I said for a lot of young men he'd become a significant figure, which is something that should worry you and worry everybody.
But it didn't worry you enough to not repeat a rumour from him?
I didn't repeat any rumours from him.
Okay.
I asked for the truth, as did, and you might have forgotten this, as did the terrorism czar, as did Lord Carlisle. They said government must level with the people.
To stop rumours like the one that you spreading, some might say.
I left it for 48 hours before I commented, and I could see what was happening. There was lunacy happening online. And if we'd been told the truth, those riots would have been a fraction of the size.
Do you regret that tweet?
No.
You don't regret it?
It's not just O'Brien, by the way, who makes up the lunacy at LBC, which I now quite rightly call the Labour Broadcasting Company. Also leading the charge is the hard leftist Lewis Goodall, a client journalist for Labour at best, propagandist at worst. So here he was yesterday interviewing the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, about the fact she accepted thousands of pounds from Labour donor Lord Ali to throw a birthday party.
He's given £300,000 to 7 cabinet ministers at the moment. Do you accept that there could be a perception, at the very least again, that one man giving so much money to so few people at the very top of government could be a little bit of a problem?
So Lord Ali, who I've only ever met in my time as a Labour MP, is someone that came from a pretty humble background, made his way very successfully in business, and as a Labour peer has donated to Labour politicians, to the Labour Party, in order to secure a Labour government. That's what he...
And paying for your birthday party?
He donated to me to fund a number of events, yes, absolutely, declared in the correct way.
Was that essential to secure a Labour government, that birthday party?
It was a great opportunity, around that to have an event for colleagues in Westminster, including journalists, MPs, shadow cabinet, as was, people in the education world. And I also hosted another event alongside that for journalists, including those who work in education, where I was joined by my colleagues from the shadow education team.
Would you accept more money for Lord Ali for other birthday parties?
I don't, to be honest with you, I don't usually make a big thing about my birthday, and that was a professional kind of context to it. My own birthday, in terms of celebrations with family, is usually a pretty low-key affair, and my own family didn't even come along to that event.
Oh, your own family may not have been there, Bridget Phillipson, but I'm going to show you how corrupted our mainstream media is. Because guess who was at that funded birthday party? Lewis Goodall, the bloke conducting that interview. And I have to say, that is seriously effed up. The Sun's political editor, Harry Cole, posted on X, the newsagent T-boy Lewis Goodall wasn't entirely honest with his listeners today. And he then linked to his column where he wrote, fearless interrogator Lewis Goodall beat up on Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson on his LBC show yesterday, overtaking donations from Lord Ali to pay for her 40th birthday party. What the lefty presenter failed to tell his listeners, however, was not only did he attend the glittery bash last year, he also asked for his wife to be invited too. Now, Lewis claimed that he had mentioned this obvious conflict earlier in the show, but it's really not the point. While Lbc'S main presenters are quite literally putting a target on Nigel Farage's back, they're giving a complete pass to the type of cronyism and sleaze that they just spent the past 5 years railing against. No wonder millions of you refuse to trust the corrupted and captured MSM. Now, let me bring in today's superstar panel. And today, I am delighted to welcome back the former UKIP leader Henry Bolton, author of the excellent Bolton's blog on Substack, which I really recommend everyone subscribe to, like I have, and making her Outspoken debut. A rising star that I've been very impressed with, the political commentator Chloe Dodds. She is a contributor for Reasoned UK, which I very much recommend you follow on YouTube. Great to have you both here. So, Henry Bolton, is Nigel Farage correct to say that James O'Brien is now inciting hatred against him?
I think so, absolutely. James O'Brien has been provocative, aggressive, unpleasant, nasty, and often untruthful commentator and presenter. He seems to want to build his career on what I might call shock tactics, coming out with absolutely appalling accusations of the most extreme nature, because he thinks it generates interest and it provokes listeners to get emotionally involved, and he's probably right, but it's downright irresponsible. And I do think that after his latest attack on Nigel, LBC need to give him at least a warning about his conduct, because it is downright irresponsible. That said, though, Dan, I know Nigel well, but I think on this, he's playing the victim a little bit, because actually, one of the things about leadership, in my view, is that you've got to have vision, you've got to have personality, you've got to have character, you've got to have drive. He's got all these things, energy, charisma, but you've also got to have intuition, judgment, if you like, and moral fiber. Now, I would never talk about Andrew Tate in any sort of positive light whatsoever. Also, when I saw Nigel's video about what was going on and the fact that we weren't being told what was, there was no transparency about the Southport riots, he was right, but it was, again, politicians tend to play on people's emotion, and the strongest emotion is anger and frustration with the authorities, whatever government, and Nigel does that very well. And I think that wasn't very well judged in this case, but that doesn't in any way absolve James O'Brien. James O'Brien is a nasty. I think he's got psychological problems, to be quite honest with you. I think he's a very nasty, very unpleasant, very unstable individual who absolutely LBC should exercise a bit of responsibility and rein him in.
Chloe, loads to pick up on there. So let's kick off first with O'Brien specifically. Do you agree with Nigel saying that he should be booted from the air? I mean, I always find this really ironic, Chloe, because obviously I'm a free speech absolutist. So I actually believe daylight is the best disinfectant. My solution is never to sack people, to cancel people, because that's what they did to me. And actually, in this day and age, you can't cancel anyone, can you? Because you just go into the independent space. So I don't necessarily think that is the solution, but there is clearly so much hypocrisy surrounding how O'Brien is able to incite violence compared to how anyone in the right is not really even allowed to criticize folk on the left.
I mean, just listening to that one statement at the start of his show, at the start of James's show, there was hypocrisy in that statement in itself, because he was first talking about the race riots and the racist thugs, and then straight after that talks about how Nigel uses inflammatory rhetoric. You're using inflammatory rhetoric by binning off anyone who went to a riot as someone who is racist, as opposed to someone who's just genuinely concerned about the insanely high migration numbers that this country can't cope with. So I'd say that to start with. I think that he is very nasty and very divisive. I totally agree with Henry on that. But I wouldn't agree with Nigel to say that he is directly inciting violence, because similarly, we saw when people were being arrested for Facebook posts, they were being arrested if someone said something with not very nice rhetoric, which may lead to violence. It might inspire violence. And I thought that that was wrong. I think if someone posts on Facebook saying, okay, we all need to meet at 7 o'clock at this place and we're all going to beat up a bunch of Muslims, okay, fine, that is clearly inciting violence. And maybe that's the only case when steps should be taken. Now, when it comes to what LBC should do, I know there's loads to pick up on here, so plenty to talk about. I think that LBC, as you say, daylight is the best disinfectant, Dan. And I think that I saw an article by Guido earlier in the year saying that James O'Brien's ratings were falling and falling. I think people are fed up of his rhetoric. And so hopefully, maybe they won't
let the market decide.
Exactly. Let the market decide. The ad revenue will fall. People won't want to sponsor his shows anymore. And then hopefully he'll get kicked off that way. I hope that that's the way, and that daylight can be the best disinfectant, as you say.
And what do you make of Henry's criticism of Nigel after the Southport massacre? Because personally, I don't agree with Henry on that, Chloe. I think there was a cover-up going on. I spoke to Richard Tice on the show on Friday. He believes there's still a cover-up going on. And the thing is, if you cover up information, it is sometimes that information vacuum that leads to unrest. Why were we not told more before the alleged perpetrator was charged?
I mean, whether there was an intentional cover-up or not, I don't know for sure, but certainly having an information gap, as Nigel has pointed out, in an era of social media where things move fast, that is going to cause speculation. And I think that what James O'Brien and many others have done, where they've essentially made it out as if Nigel is the sole cause as the riots, is completely wrong. It's just completely erroneous. The reality is that these riots were coming for years and years and years. We've had grievances bubbling up over years and years, people not being listened to. And whether it was the Southport event or whether it was some other event, sure, we saw some stabbings happen in the weeks following after that. Those could have been the sparking event if it wasn't Southport, right? It was going to happen at some point, let's be honest. And I think that a lot of politicians that don't like Nigel Farage and media outlets and whatnot that don't like Nigel Farage, they wanted to point the finger at him to keep people's eyes off the real problem, which is rising immigration for years and years and years, and nobody being listened to. People
failure of
tried to
multiculturalism, an invasion of our southern border. Oh, and by the way, if we have that discussion, we're far right. And actually, Starmer still hasn't allowed us, how ridiculous I even have to say that, to have that discussion. But just one other point I wanted to see where you stood on, Chloe, compared to Henry, is in regards to Andrew Tate. Because again, I have a bit of a different opinion on this. I think if people just don't talk about Andrew Tate and act as if Andrew Tate doesn't exist and that he isn't a big influence at the moment, then aren't we just, again, denying reality? And wasn't Nigel's point actually to say, look, Andrew Tate is a big influencer. Lots of young men are being influenced by him. So why is that? What is it at the moment about society that makes it, let's be quite frank here, a deeply unpleasant place for a lot of straight white men in the UK?
Well, I mean, there are several things I'd say on this. So first of all, I think that Nigel is absolutely right to point out the fact that it's interesting that Andrew Tate has acquired such a huge following from young men. Even if you don't like Andrew Tate, there must be a reason for that, and we must look into that. Just as much as Nigel made the observation that maybe the West did some things that provoked Putin, and that may have contributed to the start of the Ukraine war. Just observing facts like that has led to so much horrible spin against Nigel, you know, saying he's a Putin apologist and that he's, you know, a huge Andrew Tate enthusiast. And, you know, secondly, on Andrew Tate, I don't think he's perfect, but I actually agree with a heck of a lot of what he says. I don't agree with his conversion to Islam, and I think that he kind of he very much uses sort of locker boy talk, and he'll sometimes say things that I don't completely agree with. But I think that I had to be interviewed for a documentary on Andrew Tate's case, and so I had to really look in depth into his case. I've been through all the information that is available, all the case documents, all about the one girl, Emma Gabby, who is the sort of only supposed victim, and her Moldovan friend Untila, and it is the most fabricated, obviously fabricated case. You have all the WhatsApps very, very
and Candace
clearly
Owens,
there.
who's done exactly the same thing as you,
and
has come to the same conclusion.
People, if you just look at the case, it is clear as day, right? And I believe in innocent until proven guilty. I'm sure that there is some possible world where someone presents to me information where I go, actually, okay, now there's clearly evidence that he's done something wrong, but I am yet to see that, and I am not going to call him a rapist and a human trafficker until I see any of that. And every time you see these people coming up with microphones questioning Nigel, or whether it's Andrew directly or anyone else talking about the rape and human trafficking charges, none of those people have read any of the information about the case. I mean, you'll have Andrew and Tristan will talk back to these people, come up with the microphones and ask them, okay, who are the victims? And they're like, I have no idea, because they haven't even looked.
A financial motivation. We can never forget that. I mean, Henry
absolutely.
Bolton, do you want to come back at some of that? Because I think Chloe makes a very fair point, doesn't she? Innocent until proven guilty. Tate's been found guilty of absolutely nothing at this point.
Yes, I agree. But look, you know, we started talking about Andrew Tate in the context of Nigel's comments around Southport. And I don't think it was wise for Nigel to make that link. The other thing is, absolutely, there was an information void. And absolutely, when there is an information void, when something highly emotive and dramatic and traumatic has happened, as it did in Southport, then that void is going to be filled by speculation. There is no if, there's no but about that. It will inevitably happen. And I think Nigel would be absolutely right to call out the police and the Home Office, the Home Secretary, for allowing that void to occur. The irresponsibility of that on the part of the authorities is staggering. Now, where I think Nigel had the wrong approach, and I'm not saying this with hindsight, the moment I saw him that video, this is exactly what I thought. I thought, I thought it was unwise because I thought Nigel has not yet got into the role of being a member of Parliament. What he should have done is I think, what I would have done is I would have written to the Home Secretary, I would have written to the Chief Constable, and I would have said, I'd have made a video. I am concerned that there's an information void here. I am concerned that that void will be filled by speculation, and that is dangerous. And I have written to the Home Secretary and to the Chief Constable asking them to address that as a matter of absolute urgency. That would have been, I think, the wise way forward. And I don't see why, one would want to link it to Andrew Tate. And I agree exactly precisely with what's just been said. I don't like Andrew Tate. I don't like James O'Brien. But both have got a right to express themselves as much as I have. I think
no, indeed. I guess it's just ironic, isn't it, Henry? Because James O'Brien is always the first leading the charge for people to be cancelled. It was James O'Brien, actually, who pretty much got Nigel Farage sacked from LBC back in 2020.
Yeah.
So he is a hypocrite of the highest order.
Absolutely, and I agree with Claire on that. That absolutely, the man. I genuinely think that he has issues and that they need to be addressed, because if he is so startlingly hypocritical, he is so startlingly aggressive and unpleasant, and it's just not
wrong because he believed Carl Beach. He believed Carl Beach. I'm sorry, anyone who was taken in by Carl Beach, pretty much the biggest fantasist in British legal history, who tried to ruin the good name of many, many very honourable people, some of whom died during the process. I'm sorry, you cannot take them seriously as a journalist ever again, because Carl Beach is a paedophile and is a fantasist. And it was James O'Brien who platformed him for political reasons. That's the issue. But I was actually so let down by the mainstream media all weekend long. I've had so much to pick from. But I have to show you this interview, or at least some of the interview. The whole thing would make you mad. With a guy called Matt Barbette, who has taken up a job on Sly News. Now, I used to know Matt Barbette. He seemed like a very decent individual to me. But as soon as you now take the Sly News Concast coin, you have to start to hate England. Seriously, that's what it's about. And in this interview with the Conservative leadership favourite Robert Jenrick, Matt Barbette showed the sort of discrimination against the English and English identity that you would never see a mainstream presenter take against virtually any other country in the world. I was truly disgusted. Watch this.
What do you mean by English identity?
Well, look, I'm a proud Brit and a proud unionist. I want a strong Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but I'm also proud to be English. And I think it is incredibly important that just as Scottish and Welsh leaders speak up for their distinct national identities, so do English politicians.
I'm going to interrupt you there, sorry. What is English identity?
Well, just as every nation has its own distinct history and culture, so does ours in England.
What is it?
Just as we would know what, a Frenchman would know what France stands for.
What is English identity then, Robert Jenrick?
It's the history and the culture of our country. And just as Scottish and Welsh politicians would speak with great pride about their own histories and identities, so I think it's right that English politicians do the same.
If you can't describe what English identity is, how is anybody coming here meant to understand that?
Well, I don't think, with great respect, that you distill the identity and the history of England into a soundbite like you're asking of me. There are things that I love about this country.
You've tried to distill it in an op-ed for the Daily Mail, haven't you?
Well,
that's what you've tried to do. When I think we've
No,
both
I think I made a very
realised
different point to that, with all due respect. You, I suspect, are trying to dismiss a British or an English politician speaking about our national identity. I think it's incredibly important that we do talk about it. And I don't think that you distill it into
English identity.
I don't think
What do you mean by English?
Just imagine a mainstream presenter asking that of a Welsh politician, a Scottish politician, a Northern Irish politician, let alone a politician from Jamaica or South Africa. But Robert Jenrick held his own on this, and this is how he responded to that interview by Sly News on GB News yesterday.
No, Camilla, I didn't find it hard to describe Englishness at all. In fact, I was surprised that one of your rival channels even asked me the question. No one would ask a Welshman or a Scotsman or a Frenchman to define what is Welsh or Scottish or French identity.
Chloe, they actually hate the English, don't they? The establishment and the mainstream media. I mean, I'm remembering Emily Thornberry slamming someone who was daring to hang the St. George's flag outside their house. And I just found that interview completely bizarre. I mean, it's so easy to define what it means to be English. I mean, the royal family, Stonehenge, Bangers and Mash, the Sunday roast. I mean, there's the football. I mean, there's a million things that we should be so proud of, let alone our incredible history.
Absolutely. I mean, it feels as though we've certainly gone backwards in the fight against racism. We sort of got rid of racism and then created a new racism against white people. You know, as long as just racist against white people, it's okay, apparently. So St. George's flag definitely can't hang that. But, you know, imagine if you tried to tell someone off for holding up a Palestinian flag or any other country's flag. And you go to any other country, right? You go to Italy, you go to France, you go to Spain, and people have their flags up outside their windows. They have them everywhere. They're not ashamed. They're proud of their countries, and there's nothing wrong with it. But for some reason in England, it's now become this sort of horrible racist thing to have your own country's flag up. And then about him not being able to sum up in one quick soundbite what Britishness is. I mean, as you say, Dan, it's a million things. It's all the little things. Like, for example, the Brits are great at queuing, for example.
Yes.
And if you're standing in a queue and you've waited patiently, and then you see someone who's not English and clearly hasn't spent much time in the country come barges past and goes right to the front of the queue, that's where you're frustrated that someone hasn't integrated into your country.
Yeah.
It's so many little things. There was actually, you're probably aware of Peter Blexley. He's a former detective. He comes on GB News and talk a lot. And I was talking to him in the Talk Green Room, and he was saying to me, for example, one of the reasons why Caribbean cultures were able to integrate into Britain far better than people from Muslim countries is just because the Caribbeans are able to enjoy a drink. So they're all able to come down the pub and join in with the Brits. Whereas because those from the Muslim countries don't drink, and they don't go down to the pub like us Brits. That's one reason why they haven't been able to integrate. And I was like, I've never thought of that before, but it is so true. I mean, the pub is such a central part of our culture. It's so many little things. And I know that they want their 10-second soundbite, but you just can't sum it up in that.
Well, of course not. But I mean, come on. Think of English culture from Shakespeare to the Beatles to the Spice Girls. I mean, gosh, there's a million things that anyone could say.
But I tell you what, Dan, I went to Shakespeare's Globe recently, and I was very disappointed because it's been very wokeified. So the entire cast was female. They didn't have a single man, even though most of the roles were meant to be men. And then they had Richard III was played by a woman, and they basically
they put trigger warnings up too, don't they?
To show that she was playing a man, they made her wear this like big sparkly jock strap for the whole show. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous.
No, the Globe is completely captured by the woke mind virus. It's such a shame because who would have thought it? But Henry Bolton, it is astonishing, isn't it, that this anti-English feeling pervades the mainstream media, and shame on Matt Barbette, an Englishman, doing down his own culture like that.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, and look, you know, it's Nottingham University, I think, isn't it? You might correct me if I'm wrong. That wants to get rid of the term Anglo-Saxon. I mean, there's the Anglosphere, there's the Americans, there's the Canadians, the New Zealanders, the Australians. All that, okay, the Canadians speak French as well. But you know, all of this, you know, there is this drive to remove our own identity. Now, I think, you know, if you look at what they did in the USSR and the Soviet Union after the Russian Revolution, you know, what did they do? They tried to dilute and, if you like, fade away the various sort of national groups that were within the Soviet Union, within Russia. The Central Asians were sort of partly ethnic cleansed, and populations were moved in order to achieve that. It is a left-wing thing, because when you have pride in your nationality, then, and if that nationality, particularly like ours, is based on a long, centuries, if not millennia old tradition of freedoms and common law and independence and so on, and equal justice, then actually you've got an opposition, a resistance to a socialist agenda, a Marxist agenda, if you like. And so that's, I think, why they come out in a rash if you mention Britishness or Englishness. And I think that's the drive here. And what they have taken over, I remember when I was at school, we had, there was sort of, even amongst us sort of 11 and 12-year-olds, we were talking about school teachers who'd come from the London School of Economics, and weren't they sort of, they were particularly sort of un-British, and because they just, didn't have any interest in British history or British identity. The history teachers were all old school people, they were good traditionalists, if you like, and more conservative. And that has just grown. So they're in the media now. Now we're spending a fortune on the diversity consultants and officers within the NHS, within the civil service. We're spending a fortune on consultancies to try and take forward the diversity agenda, and it's all supporting other cultures, other societies, and ours doesn't get the protection that they do. So it's totally unbalanced, and I'm desperately worried if we, the Brits, don't wake up to this. The English, the Scottish, because look at Scotland, it's suffering. Look at the Irish; they've got the same problem, and it's growing. And we've got to push back against the likes of James O'Brien and Matt. If we don't, then and you are doing so, Dan, so well done. But
yes, I definitely am. Now, look, if you thought Scrounger, Starmer and Victoria Sponger were bad, in fact, this weekend showed it was just the beginning of the sleaze and the cronyism, which is actually permeating through this entire new Labour government. But what I have found astonishing is that the people in the mainstream media and the celebrities that support Labour, who were the most vociferous when it came to criticism of Boris Johnson for every tiny little thing, are now trying to say, nothing to see here, folks. Gary Neville at the Labour Party conference is the greatest example. Watch.
Absolutely incredible that this level of attention is now being paid to a Labour Prime Minister. When I look at the absolute cronyism that we watched for years under that, they were just let go. I'm sorry for the rant, but absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely incredible.
Oh, just ridiculous. And there you saw Lisa Nandy, the culture secretary, nodding along. She's one of those ones that got a free ticket to Taylor Swift. What about Angela Rayner, though? Do you remember her working class horror at Boris trying to raise money from donors in order to renovate Downing Street? In one rant on X, she wrote, who do you think you are, Boris Johnson, telling working class people to rely on their own efforts when you go around with a begging bowl to Tory donors to pay for your posh new wallpaper and moan that you can't live off your 150k salary? Disgusting. Then there was another. Do you remember this? This was on the 5th of February 2021, where she wrote, instead of spending taxpayers' money on more photographers for the sake of his own vanity, the PM should prioritise feeding the children who will go hungry in half term next week and families facing 1,000 cuts to universal credit. Oh, Angela, front page of the Daily Mail today, revealing that she is enhancing her profile at the expense of the taxpayer with a new £68,000 vanity photographer. And not only that, Angela Rayner also decided to take her friend. The media keeps calling this guy her friend, Sam Tarry. Remember him? He was the Labour MP, too much to the far left, so he was deselected at the last election. Him and Angela Rayner are having a romantic relationship, or at least were. Let's just be honest about that. They're not friends. They were lovers. And these lovers decided that rather than spend their own money from their very handsome MP salaries, they would stay over the new year in a New York apartment with massive views of Central Park and a gym and a swimming pool and a roof terrace, all paid for by the Labour billionaire donor Lord Ali. But when Angela Rayner was questioned about that hypocrisy at the weekend, do you think she admitted that she had done anything wrong? Of course not.
Did you break the rules? Well, first of all, I didn't go to New York with another person. That person went to New York and I met up with them, and I met up with a number of friends while I was in New York. It was a personal holiday and I think I followed the rules. In fact, I went above that and I wanted to do that to be transparent about the connection that I had of the use of that apartment.
But they stayed in that apartment. Sam Tarry, who used to be a Labour MP, stayed in that apartment and you didn't declare it. Did you break the rules?
I don't believe I broke any rules. I had the use of the apartment and I disclosed that I had the use of the apartment. In fact, I think I was overly transparent because I think it was important, despite it being a personal holiday, because that person, as a friend, had already donated to me in the past for my deputy leadership.
So you're not
I felt
sorry
it was
for doing
important.
that? You're not sorry for that? You're not saying to people this morning, you know what, maybe that was a misjudgment. Maybe I should have declared absolutely everything, because the rules, I'll just read that to our viewers. Members should register in this category any visit, whether accompanying the member or not. It says pretty clearly, if someone else is with you, you're meant to declare it, and you didn't.
It says if you're on parliamentary business or it's...
Did you break the rules?
Well, first of all, I didn't go to New York with another person. That person went to New York and I met up with them, and I met up with a number of friends while I was in New York. It was a personal holiday and I think I followed the rules. In fact, I went above that and I wanted to do that to be transparent about the connection that I had of the use of that apartment.
But they stayed in that apartment. Sam Tarry, who used to be a Labour MP, stayed in that apartment and you didn't declare it.
I mean, Henry Bolton, come on. Come on. And that's just the beginning, isn't it? She was getting her clothes paid for as well.
Yeah. And she's not the only one, and Starmer's not the only one. Rachel Reeves, there's a whole raft of them. But there are four things that I think are shocking about this. The degree of hypocrisy, as you quite rightly pointed out, the political lack, or the lack of political acumen. They clearly seem to think that people wouldn't mind this, and I think one of them was it Angela Rayner, who I'm not sure, who said that people would probably just think that it was, it was fair enough. No, that was Starmer, I think.
Yeah, fair dues, he said.
Fair dues. I mean, come on. Then there are the two excuses. There's one excuse that you heard there from Angela Rayner. Well, I followed the rules. Look, you can follow the rules. It's still not right. And then there is, yes, but the Conservatives were doing it. I don't care. Look, nobody in this country, honestly, I believe, thinks that it's okay to be taking these freebies for getting your suits bought, your glasses bought, your holidays paid for and so on, when you're cutting the winter fuel allowance from 10 million pensioners, when you've been talking about, I think they're rowing back on that now, axing the single person's council tax thing, all of the taxes that are coming, and they're just on the take. There is probably not one person who genuinely in this country believes that that is sensible, that it's politically wise, or that it's morally correct. And it infuriates me. And I wouldn't be surprised that in 2029, if not before, the Labour government loses, or the Labour Party loses the next election because of this, because they have demonstrated that they're dishonest, immoral, lack integrity, and are hypocritical, and self-serving. And that doesn't sit well with the British people, no matter how passive we often are.
The beginning of the end. And in fact, I don't even think Angela Rayner was the worst one, because Bridget Phillipson, the education secretary, got Lord Ali to pay, wait for it, for her 40th birthday party. So Chloe, I'll get you to react in just a moment. But first, this is how she tried to justify it on Sly News.
What for exactly?
Yep. So I received that money from Wahid Ali, who's a long-standing Labour peer. It was used to fund 2 events, all of which was declared properly and thoroughly. That's why that information is in the public domain. The first event was ahead of my birthday, so I was turning 40. I thought it was a good opportunity to get people together in a professional context. So it was journalists, trade unionists, education people, MPs and shadow cabinet. The second event was an event that I held also again for lobby journalists, for people in the education world, as part of a reception. That's, you know, it was in a work context, you know.
That's a very nice thing, but if a Tory had done that 2 years ago, I know exactly what you'd be saying to me this morning. They should pay for their own birthday parties.
Look, this was in a work context.
What for exactly?
I mean, come on, Chloe, you can't have a 40th birthday in a work context, can you?
No, I mean, she is just so clearly lying through her teeth. Nobody is buying it. And I mean, the hypocrisy is just unreal. I mean, Labour, they haven't exactly had any honeymoon whatsoever, have they?
They don't deserve one.
No, they don't deserve one at all. And I think this is really, really going to infuriate the British public, because Labour, you know, they were on the back bench, well, on the opposition benches for so many years, pointing the finger at the Tories and saying, you know, we're on our moral high horse. We'd never do such a thing. We'd take care of you guys. We wouldn't do all this Tory sleaze. You know, you can take the word Tory off sleaze now. They're all at it. They're all the same. You know, people have been met with the hard reality that both parties, Labour and the Conservatives, they don't really care about you that much. They are self-serving and they're all the same. That Labour promised us that they were the party of change, that they were going to be different. They were going to bring trust back to politics. But nothing's changed at all, has it?
No, it really hasn't.
Dan, if I may, there's another issue here. And it's not just about the members of parliament themselves. It's also about Lord Wahid Ali. Because, you know, I know I was a party leader, and I think UKIP was probably the 4th largest party in membership in the country at the time. And you know, donors, not always, but generally expect some sort of return on their investment, and that's how they see it. Sometimes it's just that they support the party and its ethos and its policies, but sometimes they actually want to influence policy at certain points in time, and they will remind you. I was reminded by donors that way before I became leader, they had donated money to X, Y, and Z in the party, and therefore I should be sympathetic to what they thought should happen. Well, you know, Lord Wahid Ali has he's a member of the House of Lords, so he's in the Assembly, in the National Assembly, but he has effectively bought his way into government. He's been attending government meetings in Downing Street. Now, you know, that, to my mind, is corruption. It's not just because it's looking bad.
He's a TV executive. Exactly. That is such a good point, Henry, because he is a TV executive. He is not a political mastermind. He is there for one reason and one reason only, and it's the big bucks, and it stinks. But do you know what also stinks? The fact that the mainstream media is allowed to get away with things with this Labour government that when I was at GB News, we were hauled over the coals for. And I found just one example of it, which I think is totally indicative over the weekend. So Aisha Hazarika, she is a Labour peer in the House of Lords. This was just part of the most sick-inducing, over-the-top, sycophantic, lovey interview with Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, on Times Radio over the weekend. Now, how on earth is this allowed? How on earth is this allowed, given the position that has been taken about GB News politicians interviewing Conservative politicians? Watch this.
Well, that's my best freebie. Spending time with you, Aisha. There you go. I've made up for it.
Oh, actually, I can give you a freebie here. I can present to you a very special thing.
I can't take that.
It's a Times Radio cap that says Thinking Cap. We can give you this freebie. It's all declared. It's all in the public domain.
Oh, God.
What's your favourite band or singer?
Britney, obviously.
What's your favourite Britney song?
Toxic. It's the most
very good.
Perfect piece of pop music ever written.
Can you do karaoke to?
I am doing the Labour Students Disco DJ set, and it is back-to-back Britney, so don't miss it. It's Britney hour.
It's Britney, bitch.
I mean, Chloe, come on. Come on. How is that allowed?
I don't know. I mean, what was the lady interviewing her? Was that also a previous Labour MP? Is that where the issue is?
No,
here?
she's a Labour peer. She's a Labour peer in the House of Lords, Aisha Hazarika. So she is a Labour politician, sort of masquerading as a journalist. Now, when this was done on GB News, for example, when Esther McVeigh and Philip Davies interviewed the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, they were found in breach by the off-communists. Now, personally, I don't think the off-communists should exist, and Times Radio should be able to broadcast whatever they want. But that isn't the regulatory system we live in, and so it feels like there is one rule for the right of politics and another for the left.
If the rules are going to be there, as much as I disagree with them being there, it better be applied evenly to everyone. I mean, we've just seen this report coming out finally saying that the BBC, they breached guidelines, I think, 1,500 times when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war. But it's taken that long for us to see that, right? They were able to get away with this stuff for ages and ages and ages, with the off-communists doing absolutely nothing about it. Whereas an outlet like GB News, one little step out of line and they are all over them trying to take them down. I mean, it's genuinely a miracle that the channel still exists, given how hard the off-communists have gone against them.
So we have to laugh, don't we, sometimes, at this madness.
Sometimes better to laugh than cry.
Well, I've got something to make you laugh. I actually think this woman is absolutely brilliant. She is the comedian who has finally nailed Angela Rayner, and what a perfect weekend to do so. Watch this.
It's Deputy Prime Minister, proud Northerner and basic instinct enthusiast, Angela Rayner, and welcome to another no-brainer with Angela Rayner. Now, I wouldn't normally do more than one no-brainer in a week, but this week is a little bit different because our Keir has come under fire from the British press, and I feel as though I have got to say something because it is not on. It is bang out of order what is going on right now. So the British press have printed stories about our Keir and they're calling him names. There's a lot of misinformation and they're calling him names like Free Gear Keir. Free Gear Keir! Who doesn't get freebies in Westminster? Everybody gets freebies. So long as you declare it and it's all above board, there's nothing wrong with it. Everybody does it, right? So I don't see why the press are coming down so hard.
I have a feeling that woman is going to have a hell of a lot of material. But breaking right now, Kellie Jay Keen, the women's rights activist, was disgustingly assaulted during a Let Women Speak event in the UK over the weekend. Now, I've got to know Kellie Jay Keen over the years. I think she's a brilliant woman. She's incredibly brave. Some people would know her as Posy Parker, and I was absolutely disgusted when she went to my homeland of New Zealand and was pelted in tomato soup in an absolutely disgusting display of, I think, woke savagery. But the fact that it's now happening here in her home country is so wrong. But Kellie's very brave. This was her reaction afterwards.
How are you not shaking? I'm shaking my face. Jesus Christ.
And in fact, it was her supporters who were more concerned about her. What?
Has anyone got any towels or anything? No. I don't. I'm not shaking. Do you need any more water?
And the Let Women Speak crew weren't going to be held back because one of them valiantly chased after the man who was responsible for the assault, or at least, I guess we should now say, given this is criminal, alleged assault on Kellie Jay.
Shirley!
Officers! He just attacked a lady and chucked milk over her head! Yeah, I'm not going to do it, obviously.
Now, my friend Megan Kelly tweeted or posted on X, I should say, after that incident, look at this pathetic excuse of a man running like a scared rodent after dousing the Posey Parker with tomato soup at a Let Women Speak rally. This is what women face when standing up for their rights in 2024. Fight. Chloe Dodds, absolutely despicable that she is being assaulted for simply saying that females matter and fighting against the trans ideology.
I mean, it's bonkers. I mean, if you told someone 10 years ago that you would have soup thrown over you, and, you know, that's just one of many attacks she has faced. You know, everyone comes after this very brave woman online and comes after anyone who dares to say what a man is and what a woman is online. You get absolutely attacked by the dogs. If you told people 10 years ago what's going on now, they'd think it's absolutely bonkers. I mean, 10 years ago, you'd call someone a sexist for throwing soup over a woman like that. But nowadays, you're some, you know, glorified trans activist for doing that. I'm sure all of that guy's supporters are all applauding him on Twitter for what he did, no doubt. I think it's absolutely disgusting. And I think it just shows the state of debate that we've gotten to. It used to be the case that if you disagreed with someone, you could fight them with words rather than soup. It's just absolutely ridiculous. We just shout and scream at people and throw soup over them if we disagree with them these days, rather than actually have a proper debate. I'm glad to see that she has come out, it seems, unscathed and still fighting. This could have been a lot worse. You know, she could have, if that was boiling hot soup or something worse, she could have come out with burn marks all over her face. So thank God it looks like she's okay. You know, but it seems like she's sort of had a, you know, obviously it's not on the scale of nearly being assassinated, but sort of her Trump moment. Someone tried to attack her and she came out still standing and still speaking and still going strong. So good for her.
Well, indeed, it will actually only add to her cause, won't it? But you are completely right to point out one day it might not be soup. And obviously that is so concerning. But Henry, can we also just talk about these pathetic excuse of men, idiotic little woke individuals like the guys who run Led by Donkeys, who believe it's acceptable to attack females for standing up for their biological rights. This is actually, when you think about it, misogyny on speed by people who think that they are above that.
And indeed, Dan. And what's happening is that all of this is being normalised. And if we go, you know, if we look at, we started this conversation talking about James O'Brien and his rhetoric. He is normalising this hatred of anybody who he happens to disagree with. Then you've got the two-tier policing. You've got the response to Just Stop Oil, and the not just the police, but also the Crown Prosecution Service and the judges who let these people off. You've got all sorts of things. You've got people being told that we're not deporting them because, you know, although they've beaten somebody to death in the back of an ambulance and then they're Nigerian, but we're not going to deport them because of their mental health. Look, we have got a significant problem in this country where we have normalized the minority and the people who will do harm and the people who are breaking all social norms and dismantling society in doing so. We're looking after them. We are protecting them. We are saying that they are okay. What they're doing is fair enough. They've got the freedom of expression, but nobody else has. Anybody who stands up for traditional sort of social and cultural traditions and our customary sort of way of customary behavioural norms in this country is being vilified. And in that environment that's being created and has increasingly been sort of built up over the last 10 years or so, then people who are perhaps inadequate in all sorts of ways decide that it's actually fair enough for them to attack people, as this was a can of tomato soup. It was a lump of concrete with Nigel Farage and milkshakes. But we've seen members of parliament stabbed. We've seen all sorts of things. This sort of kind of protest, instead of, as Chloe says, entering into normal debate and discussion and the exchange of ideas and views, you know, people are being, you know, even lauded and celebrated for this sort of behaviour. It's absolutely outrageous. They need to be going straight to jail. No holds barred. no matter which side of the argument they're on. It's unacceptable, but we've normalised it.
Absolutely right. It's woke tyranny, isn't it? But what an absolutely fabulous superstar panel. Thank you so much to Henry Bolton, the former UKIP leader, now behind the brilliant Bolton's blog on Substack. Do subscribe. And for the first time, Chloe Dodds, excellent, big future ahead of her, a contributor to the excellent Reasoned UK and political commentator. Thank you both so much. But do stand by, because I was at the Together Declaration event on Friday night. I want to show you a couple of my favourite moments on stage, featuring two of my old GB New muckers, Bev Turner and Adam Brooks. That is up in just 1 minute. But first, everyday subtle changes occur in our bodies, often going unnoticed. It's called inflammagene, a chronic low-grade inflammation that deteriorates our health as we get older. It's more than just a sign of aging, it's a key contributor to health issues like cardiovascular diseases, dementia and depression, and physical decline. It continuously weakens the body's resilience, turning minor infections severe and impacting mental health and cognitive function. Inflammagene significantly diminishes both quality of life and independence. Proper diet, exercise, and sleep can only get you so far. So that is why I take Clean Bean by Verso. It contains ingredients targeted to fight off and help prevent inflammagene. Research shows that these ingredients clean out damaged cells in the body that affect healthy cells, reduce inflammation, protect against oxidative stress, and improve conditions like cardiovascular diseases and neurological disorders. After taking Clean Bean for some time, I've noticed less joint pain, increased energy, better mood, and clearer skin. I can think better, I don't get as sick as before, and these are all benefits actually of reducing inflammation. Plus, Verso ensures transparency and quality by publishing third-party testing results for each batch they produce, so you know you're getting exactly what you paid for. Now, you can click the description in our YouTube or Rumble show notes, or head on over to www.ver.so and use the coupon code Outspoken at checkout to save 15% on your first order. So to repeat, that's buy.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code Outspoken. But now back to the show, and I had an incredible night at the Together Declaration 3rd anniversary on Friday. I want to thank everyone who was there, everyone who supports the Together Declaration. If you don't know, Together was a group put together by a man called Alan Miller, who has become a real freedom fighter at the height of the COVID madness in 2020. And it was a haven, a sanctuary of sanity during those times where so many of us were degraded and derided for just sometimes fighting for scientific fact. For example, herd immunity exists. And it was an amazing night on Friday. Some brilliant speakers, some real inspiration, actually, from the likes of Lord Clare Fox and Dominic Frisby and Winston Marshall and Frank Furedi and Ben Habib. Lots and lots of brilliant people. Neil Oliver, too, my old mate. But I just wanted to play you a couple of personally very sweet moments. Firstly, from Bev Turner, my former GB News colleague.
Dan Wootton. GB News' loss is independent journalism's gain. Dan stuck his neck out right in the beginning when it was really hard and he had everything to lose, and he's fought multiple fights, and he is the king of reinvention. And thank God for Dan Wootton, is all I can say.
And so did Bev. And actually, I've posted on my X account today an incredible moment that is going viral, actually, thanks to one of those big anti-woke X accounts in the US of Bev Turner fighting the good fight on This Morning with Dermot O'Leary and that blithering idiot Matthew Wright, who bizarrely had a long rat's tail at the time. Very, very weird. Just going for her when she was fighting back against lots of madness surrounding the vaccine. So that really is worth a watch. And I actually featured in a panel, and there was one moment actually that I thought you might enjoy, where I spoke about one of my old colleagues at GB News, Adam Brooks. to support the journalists or the voices who we love. And they don't actually just have to be journalists. I mean, for example, Adam Brooks is here tonight, and Adam Brooks is someone who obviously is a big Together Declaration guy. And I was so proud to put Adam Brooks on GB News. He doesn't have journalistic training, but actually I think he has so much more of a common touch with what everyday people are thinking and what their issues are. And I would much, much rather hear from Adam Brooks than Beth Rigby. And I'm sure you all agree, we would much, much rather hear from Adam Brooks than Beth Rigby. And then yesterday, I want to give a shout out to all of the incredible folk who were at the Matt Fadas Business and Wealth event in Tiverton. It was a beautiful day, actually, in Tiverton. And I was so impressed by the people there, and it was a real privilege to come and speak. On Saturday, I was there, actually, Saturday night. So thank you very much. And thank you for watching. But we have a big uncancelled after show on the way. A special royal edition with the YouTube sensation, according to Taz, on why the scandal-plagued Meghan Markle called in sick to a Kevin Costner event with Prince Harry, who's now actually just arrived in New York. So what's going on is all what it seems, according to Taz. We'll have the answers. But you know, it's very important to me that we have a safe space, not patrolled by big tech, where censorship and control runs deep. So that's why we have www.outspoken.live. It is our membership section where you will get a half hour of extra content every single day. So at this stage, we come off YouTube and Rumble. We move to our own platform to continue the conversation in the uncancelled after show. All you have to do is sign up at www.outspoken.live. We are back live every weekday, so tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube and Rumble too. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you. Hope to see you on the after show in just one moment with According to Taz.